everybody, so we got a fun review today as we are finally talking Dune Part 2, the first real blockbuster of 2024. These past almost 3 months, it's been a rough go of it as far as going to the movie theaters. A lot of movies that have come out have been pretty rough experiences. During all of those rough experiences, all I could think is we are getting closer and closer to Dune Part 2, and I was hoping it was going to live up to those high expectations. Dune Part 2 follows Paul Atreides, who unites with Chani while on a warpath of revenge against those who destroyed his family. Facing a choice between the love of his life and the fate of the known universe, he endeavors to prevent a terrible future only he can foresee. As someone that is jumping into Dune having not read the source material at all, I absolutely love part 1 of the story, and I couldn't wait to see where the story would go next with that cliffhanger ending, especially as a lot of people who have read Dune told me the second half of the book is a much better experience compared to the first part. And those people were definitely not kidding, as part 2 manages to somehow elevate every aspect beyond a level that's rarely ever seen from films in the genre. Right from the very beginning of part 2, it throws you right back into the thick of things and immediately immerses you back into this rich world and the epic journey we continue to go on with Paul, a journey that I found to be absolutely riveting. There are a ton of things to be in awe in while watching Dune Part 2. It's visually breathtaking thanks to Greg Fraser's gorgeous cinematography that's only enhanced further by these jaw-dropping, adrenaline-inducing action set pieces. The battles, the sandworms. Seeing so much more of these sandworms in battle was just absolutely bonkers. It seemed like one of the major goals in Part 2 is just to scale everything up. The overall scale of everything is far superior in Part 2 compared to Part 1, which already had an amazing scale to it. It's really astonishing to see how Denis Villeuneve continues to build up the world inside of Dune in such a breathtaking, exhilarating fashion, managing to balance the grandiose, stunning action spectacle you'd come to expect from a sci-fi blockbuster with such captivating human drama in the war between the Fremen and the Harkonnen. In comparison to Part 1 narratively, the story in general this time around in Part 2 I found to be vastly more engaging. Not just from an action standpoint, but the arcs that we go on within the story and the intriguing ways it tackles deep subject matters, mostly in the ones that swirl around Paul and Chani. Most of that I found to be so compelling to watch unfold, especially as far as the developments for Paul Atreides, type of pressure that's put upon him, out for revenge and war, while having this inner conflict inside of him, grappling with these complex conflicts and his supposed destiny. In similar fashion to Part 1, Part 2 has yet another phenomenal ensemble cast. It's tough to say which of the ensemble cast I like more between Part 1 or Part 2. Part 2 might have the slight edge just because the new actors to the cast in Part 2 are some of my favorite people working right now. But there's basically no weak performances in Dune Part 2. It's a true acting showcase. Though already in his career we've seen Timothée Chalamet give great performance after great performance, the arc he goes on as Paul in Part 2 is next level. Given that Paul is such a morally complex character and the journey that we see him go on fighting this war, he manages to ride that line between the light and the dark while building this intimate chemistry with Chani. It was quite the fascinating turn seeing Paul lean more into these darker, more anti-hero tendencies, considering a lot of people like myself figured he was supposed to be the hero of this journey, not the anti-hero. It's a very fascinating thing that you don't see explored in a lot of different sci-fi stories. But going back to Chani, of course one of the things a lot of people were disappointed with Part 1 was the fact that Zendaya wasn't really in a lot of Part 1. Though I knew that going in, it still was kind of a bummer. Thankfully, obviously, that is rectified in Part 2. And like you would expect, now that she has an expanded role, she gets to truly shine in Part 2. In some ways, I would say that her character anchors the overall emotion within the story while managing to be a more complex character than I originally expected. As for other major standouts, realistically, I could pretty much just go through the entire cast and list them, but Dave Bautista is another major standout. As somebody that's a big wrestling fan and grew up watching Bautista as a wrestler in the WWE, it brings me so much joy to see him make this transition and genuinely be a great actor with this performance here. Teaming the show, in my opinion, I think he is the best WWE wrestler turned actor. If you want to talk about some epic, badass female characters, Ferguson takes her performance as Lady Jessica to the next level in Part 2. Just this badass, commanding presence. Florence Pugh gives a great performance. I don't think I've ever seen her in anything that she's been bad in. She's delightful as the princess here. I did save the best one for last, though, because we need to talk about Austin Butler in Dune Part 2. What an insane transformation that Austin Butler does for this role as Feyd-Rautha. Arguably, this probably is my new favorite performance from Austin Butler, just due to how intensely terrifying and unhinged he is as this character. A vastly different type of Feyd-Rautha than I saw back in David Lynch's Dune that was played by Sting. That version of Feyd-Rautha was a lot more terrifying for different reasons. Why While I personally didn't mind the runtime all that much, I'd be remiss to not mention the fact that it is a quite long, dense film. It's actually longer than Dune Part 1 by about 10 minutes or so, clocking in at about 2 hours and 45 minutes-ish. Even for me, who was mostly invested in the ongoing conflicts in the story, my mind still did start to wander a little bit in the middle section. I will say, by the time we get into the third act and all the pieces come together, that third act in Dune Part 2 is probably one of the best sci-fi third acts I have ever seen. Epic on the grandest scale. And it's made even more epic by, once again, another banger score from Hans Zimmer. I mean, what do you expect from Hans Zimmer at this point? His score from Part 1 already sounded so legendary as it is, so of course you knew he was going to try and step it up a bit for Part 2. I will be shocked if he does not get nominated down the road for all the awards for this score. The only true thing I was kind of bummed out about with Dune Part 2 is the fact that it ends on basically another cliffhanger ending. Who knows how long I have to wait for Dune Part 3, or technically it's Dune Messiah. I do know that at least, though I've not read the book. Maybe in the meantime I will read the books though, just because I want to find out so desperately what happens next. All around, Dune Part 2 is epic in all facets, from a technical level, story level, and thematically. It blows Part 1 out of the water with an exhilarating, ambitious tale that truly, in my opinion, is peak sci-fi entertainment. If you've been holding out these last few months to see something in theaters finally, Dune Part 2, in my opinion, I think is the movie that you must see in theaters. If you do have an IMAX around you or some level of nicer theater, I highly recommend checking it out in those premium formats. This honestly is the type of movie I think you'll get a much far superior experience if you do go see it in one of those higher formats like IMAX or Dolby or any of them. I'm not biased to any particular movie chain, but all I'm saying is AMC theaters, when it comes to Dune Part 2, they do have the famous Dune Part 2 popcorn bucket if they do have them in stock. I have a feeling they're probably going to sell out. I actually still need to get one myself. I don't own one yet. Once you get a chance to check out Dune Part 2, make sure you share your thoughts down below. What'd you think of the film once you get a chance to check it out? Did you like the film? Did you not like the film? Do you think this is superior to Part 1? Or do you like Part 1 more? Either way, share your thoughts down below. It's part of the fun of the conversation with you guys in the comment section. Thank you guys. As always, check out the videos. I always do appreciate it. Make sure you like on the video and also subscribe to the channel to update reviews, reactions, unboxings, and more. For the next time, see you guys later.